In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, February 21st. US President Joe Biden makes a surprise visit to Ukraine and pledges an additional $500 million in weaponry to his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. And a UN Security Council meeting on Monday amid North Korea's latest acts of military might ends with members noting the great divide between the US and China as well as Russia. Meanwhile, much to the horror of survivors and relief workers, another earthquake measuring 6.4 on the Richter scale strikes southern Turkey on Monday. We start with a symbolic visit to Ukraine by US President Joe Biden to boost morale as the country looks ahead to marking a grim milestone this coming Friday. That is its first full year of defense against Russian aggression. Our Song Yoo-jin reports.
A surprise visit by U.S. President Joe Biden to Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Monday's historic trip marks Biden's first visit to the country since war broke out last February. It also comes 2 months after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to the U.S. to meet him in person. Biden arrived in Ukraine's capital on Monday morning and was greeted by Zelensky at the Mariinsky Palace. Air raid sirens blared as the two leaders walked through central Kyiv. While giving joint remarks to reporters while standing side by side, Biden reiterated Washington's unwavering support for Kyiv.
1 year later, freedom is priceless. It's worth fighting for as long as it takes, and that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Biden also promised an additional $500 million worth of military assistance to the war-torn country. The new aid package includes more military equipment such as artillery ammunition, howitzers, anti-armor systems, and air surveillance radars. Biden added that the U.S. will announce fresh sanctions later this week against Russian elites and companies who try to evade existing sanctions in order to boost Russia's war efforts. Biden's Ukraine visit was tightly kept secret until the last moment, although a trip to neighboring Poland was his agenda for this week. After departing Kyiv in the early afternoon, the president arrived in Poland Monday evening to begin a 2-day visit. There, he plans to meet Polish President Andrzej Duda and hold talks with the leaders of NATO's 9 eastern flank nations. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Also, in related news, 34 countries have urged the International Olympic Committee to uphold its ban on athletes from Russia and Belarus ahead of the Paris Games next year. According to the U.S. State Department on Monday, countries including its own as well as South Korea and host country France have issued a joint statement questioning the logic of allowing athletes from the two countries to participate in the Games under neutral flags while being directly sponsored by the states. The statement also underscored the strong links between Russian athletes and the Russian military as causes of concern. Meanwhile, Monday's UN Security Council meeting to address North Korea's most recent ballistic missile launches ended with the US and its allies simply reaffirming their differences with China and Russia over ways to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula. Our Yoon has more.
Following North Korea's launches of 3 ballistic missiles, an intercontinental ballistic missile on Saturday and 2 short-range ballistic missile launches on Monday, the United States called for the first UN Security Council meeting of the year on North Korea. On Monday, the U.S. proposed that the UN Security Council condemn the North and hold the regime accountable for its provocations.
The United States condemns in the strongest possible terms the DPRK's February 18th and February 19th launches of 3 ballistic missiles. This included the DPRK's 9th international ballistic missile launch since the start of 2022.
But the 15-member body failed to come to a consensus due to opposition from China and Russia. The pair used their veto power to block the U.S. proposal. Moscow and Beijing had previously vetoed proposals at all 10 Security Council meetings last year that specifically discussed North Korea's missile threats.
Exclusively pursuing and piling on sanctions will only lead to a dead end. To bring the Korean Peninsula issue out of the predicament, all parties should adopt the right approach to non-proliferation and avoid double standards.
With China and Russia standing in opposition and accusing the United States of escalating tensions and provoking North Korea, the Security Council failed to come to a consensus. The U.S. ambassador called the body's lack of action worse than shameful, highlighting the graveness of the danger these missile tests bring not only to Asia, but the entire world.
The reality is that those who shield the DPRK from the consequences of its exploratory missile tests put the Asian region and entire world at risk of conflict.
The last time the Council took action on North Korea was when it adopted a resolution to strengthen sanctions in December 2017 on Pyongyang's ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs. After Monday's Security Council meeting, 2/3 of the body's members and South Korea issued a joint statement condemning North Korea's recent missile launches. Yoon, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Seoul's defense strategy over the next 15 years will seek to strengthen its deterrence against Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. According to the Defense Ministry here on this Tuesday, its defense document will soon be shared with President Yoon Suk-yeol for approval. Pundits believe Seoul's three-axis deterrence strategy of striking, defending and retaliating against threats from Pyongyang remains in place with renewed focus against unmanned aerial vehicles. Also within the defense initiative is Seoul's response to climate change, as well as the competition between Washington and Beijing. And much to the shock of survivors and relief workers, another powerful earthquake measuring above 6 on the Richter scale has hit Turkey and Syria, killing at least 8 people and injuring hundreds of others. Our Shin Se-byuk has details.
Another big earthquake with a magnitude of 6.3 struck southeastern Turkey and northwestern Syria Monday, the same regions that were devastated by a deadly earthquake 2 weeks ago. At least 8 deaths have been reported, 3 in Turkey and 5 in Syria, while hundreds of others have been injured. Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said the latest quake is not an aftershock from the February 6th earthquake, but rather a new, massive one, and added nearly 30 aftershocks have been detected so far. Monday's earthquake was centered in Turkey's Hatay province, where a rescue operation is underway. For many of those that are still coping with the aftermath of the initial earthquakes for 2 weeks, even the slightest tremor has them leaving their homes.
Same fear, the same feeling of unease. We cannot enter. If we do, we cannot stay. We don't know what to do. God have mercy on us. There is nothing to say.
In Syria, the earthquake has resulted in power outages and disrupted telephone and internet services in the affected regions of the two countries. A number of buildings collapsed as well. According to Reuters, the earthquake was felt as far away as Egypt and Lebanon. Meanwhile, with operations focused more on the survivors, authorities say more than 1 million people have been left homeless since the February 6th earthquakes. The death toll from those quakes has also surpassed 47,000 people. Experts also say the aftershocks could last from months to years. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
And along with the tragic losses of lives and critical damage to infrastructure, the economic repercussions of these natural disasters in Turkey are looking to be just as painful as the country seeks to rebuild itself. Our finance correspondent Kim Hyun-sung explains.
After the devastating earthquakes, Turkey now has to deal with the economic aftershocks. The damage from the recent earthquakes may cost close to $84 billion. That's close to 1/10 of Turkey's GDP last year. The earthquake will also have a knock-on effect on the country's agricultural, construction, and tourism sectors. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development says the earthquakes could set back Turkey's GDP this year by 1%. Some of the damage is slightly harder to measure.
Their work relationships have been destroyed, which means that there's going to be also in the short term this loss of productive capacity. These people are not going to be working where they used to work. So there will be this opportunity cost that the country is going to suffer from.
The quakes came at a fragile time for the Turkish economy. According to the professor, the country's heavy inflationary pressures and high interest rates had pushed many down the socioeconomic ladder. Now, with government spending pooled into repairing the damage, the situation may get worse.
On the fiscal side, we see the government, having these big plans of, rebuilding these cities and investing into these cities. So that's going to create more fiscal pressure on the inflation that might exacerbate the conditions.
The earthquakes may also change Turkish political discourse. Elections are coming up this May, with incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan under heat for the government's disaster response. Some from his party have voiced to push the election dates back a month in the wake of the earthquake, possibly hinting their unease at their chances of winning another term. As for now, the elections will stay as scheduled for May 14th. But the memory of one of the most disastrous events in the country's recent history will most likely remain in the voters' memories as they cast their ballots. And whoever wins the race will face many challenges at this critical time for the Turkish economy. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has vowed to root out crimes at construction sites by corrupt labor unions. Do take a listen.
폭력과 불법을 보고서도 이를 방치한다면 국가라고 할 수 없습니다. 불법 행위를 집중 점검 단속하고 불법 행위가 드러나는 경우에는 법에 따라 엄정하게 조치해야 합니다.
Speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, he touched upon the random demands for money as well as employment and deliberate disruptions of work at construction sites in the case of refusal. Condemning these illegal activities, President Yoon called on members of the public and private organizations to do their part in cracking down on such crimes. He also reaffirmed his drive to reform labor practices in general, urging labor unions to promote transparency by disclosing their accounting books. The number of people employed in Korea's manufacturing sector marked an annual decline last month. Now, this is reportedly the first on-year decline since October 2021. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the total number of people employed in manufacturing in January fell 35,000 on-year to roughly 4.4 million. Workers aged below 60 suffered a greater fall of 126,000, but the number of workers aged 60 and above rose by 91,000. Market insiders believe employment in the sector will continue to shrink in the months ahead in light of the sluggish exports. And consumers here in the country believe inflation will average 4% over the next 12 months. Now, this is up 0.1 of a percentage point from January and marks an increase for the second month in a row. The survey by the Bank of Korea this month links the latest consumer sentiment to higher heating bills, as well as the overall hike in prices of goods and services. Meanwhile, the composite consumer sentiment index for February came to 90.2, down half a point from last month. A figure below 100 means the public is more pessimistic than optimistic about the economy. Seoul's popular tourist and shopping venue Myeongdong is going out of its way to better cater to foreign palates as part of efforts to enhance the dining experience of foreign visitors to the district. Our Lee Soo-jin has a taste.
The shopping area of Myeongdong in central Seoul was hit especially hard by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting drop in tourists from China. Chinese tourists made up nearly 34% of all tourists to Myeongdong in 2019, but their numbers fell sharply to 3.3% last year. Tourists from other parts of the world are now filling the void. The proportion of travelers from Southeast Asia, for instance, more than doubled from 13.1% to nearly 27% over the same period. Shops and restaurants in the area are adapting to their new customers. Behind me, you can see signs that have been translated, and you can also hear street vendors calling out in languages from all over the world. Many shops also show the halal certification mark, which ensures that the product is safe for Muslims to consume.
As a tourist, I feel like I can try more of Korean food, not just typical halal food that you.
Restaurants selling Korean food have also diversified their menus so that visitors with certain dietary requirements can try traditional Korean cuisine. One such restaurant is Hangaram, a restaurant run by a traditional Korean food expert.
Since foreigners from all over the world come, we have decided to cater to their dietary needs. We created a harmony between certified halal food and traditional Korean food, and we also offer vegan options.
Coming from the U.S., there's a lot of Korean restaurants also in the U.S., but it's very rare to find like very traditional type of food. My mom, she likes to eat a little bit more like vegetarian, less. So we did have like an option for that.
With the influx of new tourists, the district is beginning to regain its vigor from before the pandemic. The vacancy rate of Myeongdong's small-sized properties had been as high as 50.3% in the fourth quarter of 2021, but has recovered to the point where by the fourth quarter of last year, just 21.5% of small properties stood vacant. However, experts say that more needs to be done for the area to fully recover.
If the economy continues to improve and tourists keep coming, Myeongdong will survive. But for vacancy rates to recover completely, it'll need to do something different.
The experts said this includes new initiatives such as creating more things for visitors to see and do. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
K-pop boy band BTS has hit 700 million views on YouTube for its music video Save Me. The video hit the milestone on Tuesday local time, and it's the group's 11th music video to reach 700 million views. It was released in the year 2016 as part of the album The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Young Forever. Separately, BTS member Suga is poised to embark on a solo world tour across 6 countries in April. A campaign that began 50 years ago is covering the mountains of Korea green again. Our Chang Won-jo has more on the campaign and its impact.
After the Korean War, South Korea became a barren land where it was difficult to find even a single tree on its mountains. This is because trees were cut down and used for fuel due to shortages. And with no trees to hold the rain, summer flooding became more frequent and made life even more difficult. In 1973, South Korea started the Forest Rehabilitation Plan to revive the country's woodlands and began planting trees on a large scale. Poplar and locust trees were planted because they grow quickly in desolate land. Larch and pine trees that need to be grown for longer but have high value, and trees that can produce fruit were also planted. After planting a total of 10 billion trees over a 50-year period, South Korea has seen an increase of more than 15 times in the amount of trees per hectare, from 11 cubic meters per hectare to 165.
50% of the devastated mountain areas are completely restored, and the forest area or the volume of trees has increased by 29 times.
The era of a forest renaissance has begun. People can now enjoy the dense, green, beautiful forests that have been well maintained for 50 years.
The forests that have been nurtured for 5 decades are expected to provide economic benefits and places for people to find an escape from city life. Chang Won-jo, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Dozens have been killed in Brazil's southeast following floods and landslides that tore through coastal towns. At least 36 people have been killed and hundreds have been displaced in São Paulo state since the weekend. 35 of the deaths were in San Sebastião and 1 person died in the neighboring town of Ubatuba. But the death toll is expected to climb as rescuers attempt to find survivors trapped in some 50 buildings that have collapsed in the wake of the disaster. The governor of São Paulo has declared a state of emergency in 5 of its hardest-hit coastal towns. According to officials in San Sebastião, the floods were triggered after the area saw a record 600 millimeters of rainfall in just 24 hours. Meanwhile, carnival events in affected areas have been cancelled. Turning over to the United States, where one person has been killed and 4 injured in a shooting along the New Orleans iconic Mardi Gras parade route. The incident took place on Sunday night local time at the popular Krewe of Bacchus parade, a popular run-up festival to Mardi Gras. According to authorities, the suspected shooter, who was armed with 2 guns, was taken into custody just moments after shots were fired. It's still being determined whether another person was involved. The person killed was a teenage boy, while a 4-year-old girl was among the injured. The Mardi Gras festival is set to take place on Tuesday. Staying in the United States, as a record number of guns were seized at airports across the country in 2022. The U.S. Transportation Security Administration says that last year, 6,542 guns were found at airport security checkpoints. Approximately 88% of these were loaded. It's the most guns seized in a single year and is an increase from the record 5,971 guns seized the previous year. Airport gun seizures have increased every year since 2010, with the exception of 2020, when COVID-19 restricted air travel. Passengers caught with guns mostly claim to have forgotten they were carrying a firearm. Guns can be taken onto planes, provided they are unloaded and placed in checked baggage. And finally, those suffering from paralysis due to a stroke could soon be able to regain some movement. This is according to preliminary results of an innovative treatment published in Nature Medicine on Monday. Researchers from the universities of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon implanted electrodes along the spinal cords of 2 people. The implants sent electrical stimulation when they tried different activities. One of the patients managed to eat a steak without help for the first time in 9 years, while the other saw improvements in reaching out their arm. Although it's the first success in addressing such conditions in stroke patients, more research is needed. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Again, we need the right gear for today's late winter cold weather. It felt sub-zero all day in the capital yesterday, but will be slightly higher this afternoon. While temperatures will be similar to a couple of notches lower than yesterday in southern parts of the country. And along with sunny spells and cold wind, a dry weather advisory has been issued in Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, and the east of Gangwon-do province. So please drink plenty of water. Meanwhile, Jeju and the south coast were under strong wind advisories this morning. Most regions had a sub-zero start this morning, and afternoon highs in most parts are hovering in single figures. Mostly sunny skies with normal to good air quality are in the forecast all day today. Definitely bring an extra layer if you will be out later. Then a warm-up is on the way ahead of a mostly dry week. After that, there will be a big warm-up for next week, taking us to double-digit afternoon highs in the capital region. Meanwhile, there is some precipitation in the forecast in the east of Gangwon-do and Jeju at the end of the week. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And those are the headlines at this hour, but do stay with us for our panel session today, during which we address the situation over in Turkey, especially amid another earthquake. See you soon.